Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and we've got some exciting aRPG news this week. Path of Exile 2 released another early access patch that keeps working towards perfecting the game. Some of Diablo 2's key devs just secured funding for a new project that's looking to take the aRPG in a fresh direction. Diablo 4's Sleigh Ride to Hell Goblin Community Event launched this week, and even Grim Dawn got a big patch. We'll cover all that and other gaming news highlights of the week in this video. And as a reminder folks, if you need any tips or guides for Diablo 4, like a comprehensive beginner's guide, I have all my video content categorized on my website, Rhykker.com, which brings us to a word from this video's sponsor. I built my website using Squarespace, and I was able to do everything myself, quickly and easily, and with zero education in the field, all thanks to how easy Squarespace is to work with. Squarespace even has a new AI tool called Design Intelligence, which combines 2 decades of industry-leading web design expertise with the latest AI tech to empower you to build a beautiful-looking, personalized website made exactly for your needs and your unique identity. Squarespace even has optimized SEO tools so that you can launch your website and start getting views as quickly as possible. Squarespace is flexible for any kind of website, with tons of design options to pick from. You can easily connect all your social accounts and also upload your video content and organize your video library. You can sell products or services, and with Squarespace Payment, you have an easy way to manage your payments in one place. You're just a few clicks away from being able to receive payments through your website, all while offering customers popular payment methods like Apple Pay, ClearPay, Klarna, and ACH Direct Debit. Basically, if you want to build a website, I recommend Squarespace. So head to squarespace.com/Rhykker or click the link in the description to start your free trial and use code Rhykker to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/RHYKKER and use code Rhykker. So kicking off with Path of Exile 2 news, retention numbers are still looking amazing. We're week 2 and still hitting close to 400,000 concurrent players on Steam alone, not counting console, as well as a dedicated launcher. And remember, these are people who are willing to pay for the early access beta of what will be a free-to-play game. We got another great patch this week addressing a number of feedback points and also making some more balance adjustments. First off, there's an up to 50% reduction in the gold cost for respeccing passives, kicking in between the start and middle of endgame progression. People have been complaining about respec costs. Previously, higher tier maps would give you increasing penalties to your resistances. They removed that. So now once you finish the campaign, the resistances that you start mapping with, that's going to remain the same. You're not going to get more nerfs to your resists and need to get higher and higher res as you go further into mapping. Then honor damage in the Trials of Secamus, they're now going to scale based on your distance to the enemy that's damaging you. So if you're in close range, you'll take 35% less honor damage than previously, tapering off as you are further and further away from monsters. This makes trials less punishing for melee players, which was another complaint. The patch implemented that system that we talked about in the last video, where you can now fast travel between checkpoints. They also added many more checkpoints per area. This should address the complaints about campaign locations taking long to backtrack through, or otherwise clear a second time if you die and all the monsters respawn. Chaos damage from enemies will scale less aggressively in endgame now. Monster crits will deal 40% reduced damage. This should help reduce the complaints about one-shots. They also disabled the volatile crystals modifier and lowered the damage from volatile plants, which were causing visibility issues and also some frustrating deaths. The patch also added a shortcut to open a skills advanced information display by right-clicking the skill on your skill bar. Yes, great user-friendly addition here. We don't have to open the whole skill menu just to get that info now. Oh, and they also improved the hitboxes on Blackjaw's abilities. So if you got one shot by him back in the campaign and were wondering what's going on, I thought I dodged that attack. Well, you probably did dodge it.
Vindication!
They did nerf freeze builds again, and Skeletal Arsonist also took a hit, but hey, crossbow buffs. Also buffs to bone spells and chaos damage spells, to encourage witches to go literally anything other than Raging Spirits. Again, very positive patch overall. Even as a Skeletal Arsonist witch, I'm still happy. My build is not dead, it's still strong. One change I am skeptical about, however, is that they've made charm modifiers on belt slots more common now as affixes. and they also start appearing at much lower level. So for anyone wondering, the only way to get the second and third charm slot to unlock is via a belt affix. I didn't realize this would be the case, and I'm not really fond of having to sacrifice a belt affix just to get more charm slots. It feels like it should just be an implicit on belts, or maybe even separate it out of itemization altogether and something you unlock by beating campaign bosses. Because with it being a belt affix, and more common now, that means that even if I don't want to use that affix, it's polluting the affix pool. So when I'm crafting or getting drops, I'm risking getting this affix instead of the affix that I want. I should also mention that I'm not sure I really like the implementation of charms at all. In theory, they're cool. Here's a way where you can choose to make yourself automatically immune to a certain effect, like a bleed, if it gets applied to you. Again, in theory, cool, but in practice, it just kind of feels like my charm isn't doing anything. If I never get affected by a bleed, is it because my charm saved me countless times, or did I just never get hit by a bleed? I think I actually preferred having to hit my flask in PoE 1 to stop the bleed. It felt like I was doing something, and I was rewarded for putting that bleed immunity on the flask. But I don't know, what do you folks think? Are you fine with how charms are now, or do you want any kind of changes to charms and how to unlock extra charm slots? And speaking of implicits, can we talk about move speed and boots? Should move speed be an implicit modifier on boots? A lot of the community feels that boots are useless without move speed as an affix. Lots of people will run garbage boots with 20% move speed just for the move speed. Now myself, I'm currently running triple resist boots with no move speed, and a lot of my problems and deaths are from not being able to run fast enough away from monsters or away from attacks. And people tell me, oh, get move speed on your boots. If an affix is mandatory, then shouldn't it be an implicit affix? I've even seen an idea that it could be one of multiple possible implicit affixes, including like a cooldown or maybe something that affects your dodge roll. Anyway, I mentioned last week that I was eager to get into endgame. I did get into endgame. I've been starting off on my mapping journey, and I am still loving Path of Exile too. I do maybe have some concerns over the difficulty of sustaining current tier maps, but we'll see if I work out a solution to that. I'm really liking the Atlas system. Though, for the moment-to-moment gameplay, when I'm doing a map itself, I'm starting to get a Path of Exile 1 feeling. It almost feels like the campaign and the endgame are two different games. Pace of gameplay has picked up in mapping. It's all now about clearing groups of enemies at a time, just slower than in PoE 1 because the base move speed is slower and we don't have mobility skills. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's just a thing that I can't help but notice. So, for instance, for people who prefer PoE 1, didn't like PoE 2's slower campaign pace, you know, maybe you'll like mapping in PoE 2. And I think the biggest surprise for me when I hit mapping was really how few bosses you run into. It feels like when you're going through the campaign, there's just so many bosses, and most maps don't have bosses. I'm not sure I'm saying that every map should have a boss, but it just feels like bosses is where the game really shines, and they ought to play a bigger role in the endgame. Even just, you know, maybe running into mini-bosses in the middle of maps would be cool. Oh, and towers. I liked towers the first couple of times I ran them until I realized it's kind of always the same thing. What if a tower was literally just a boss fight? No map before it, you just literally zoop right into a boss fight. I don't know, just an idea. Now, one issue I have been coming across while playing is readability. In a game in which it's so easy to die and so punishing to die, readability can often be a problem. Between my spell effects and ground effects obscuring danger, and even just having a hard time telling what is an invisible blocking wall. Like, I continue to die because of this. Like, I think I'm out in the open and can easily escape enemies, only to realize, oh, that puddle is actually impassable terrain, and then I get boxed in and killed. Then you got rare monsters that explode in this really cool, like, gory effect. But in a game in which some monsters explode after dying into something that can actually kill you, it feels like it's adding unnecessary paranoia that I have to remember okay, which of these post-death explosions is purely cosmetic and which will actually kill me? And hey, I mean, I wouldn't mind if none of the post-death explosions would actually kill me. One thing I've been loving while mapping is running into Expedition. It's by far my favorite League mechanic. Blight and Delirium, they're okay. But I actually hate running into Ritual, or I've come to hate it, because the map design in PoE 2 often has these tight choke points, and the Ritual locks me into this small area with a ton of monsters spawning, and I'm a summoner build, so I don't do like direct DPS, so it's just really easy for me to get surrounded and ganked without the ability to like plow my way through the monsters. And it's really a shame because I actually love the Ritual crafting mechanic. It's just the fight itself and getting locked in these maps that has just made it frustrating for me that now I've just started skipping all the rituals because I die half the time anyway. Then, not nearly as big of a deal, but it feels like strongboxes are too slow to deal with, particularly because the monsters just kind of spread out and there's always one guy who's wandered off somewhere, can't find him, you're wondering why the loot hasn't dropped. What if a strongbox summoned one of those mini-bosses? Again, bosses are the best part of the game. Or at least, that's how I felt before I got to mapping. Again, it just feels like there's this weird disconnect between the campaign experience and the mapping experience. In the campaign, you're taught that you can die again against bosses. The checkpoint is right outside the boss arena. You have time to learn and master the mechanics. You can accrue all the deaths that you want. But then in the endgame, one death results in the map failing. So I spend, 10 or 20 minutes, however long, trucking my way through a map, finally to get to the boss. I don't remember what this boss's mechanics are from the campaign because there's so many bosses, which is a good thing. Then I get one shot and boom, I lose the map. I can't try again. I lose 10% of my XP. I lose the map key. I lose whatever modifiers rolled on it. I lose my Atlas node modifiers, including the boss. It's just like really punishing. And when you're pushing higher maps, which are harder to get, then you also end up having to go back to farming lower tier maps, so you lose your progress on farming the highest maps you can entirely. So you're just set back even more. And then doing lower tier maps means you'll be getting lower item level loot, so you can't even farm the higher item level gear that you may need to tackle the higher tier maps. And like, I know hardcore players are just laughing now, but there's a reason that a lot of people choose to not play hardcore. Oh, and I hear the Pinnacle boss fight is basically the biggest example of this in action. You have to put so much time farming up all the materials that you need before you can even get a shot at him. And then you literally only get one shot. And, without getting into spoilers here, he has some mechanics that can very easily kill you in one shot. Meaning the best way to play the game is to just watch some Twitch streams or some YouTube guides, learn all the mechanics first, rather than going in blind and probably, most likely, failing. And I just think it's a shame when you're encouraged to not play the game in order to get good at the game. When we talk about Dark Souls difficulty, PoE 2 is like the Dark Souls of ARPGs. Souls-like games generally let you slam your head against a boss over and over and over until you master its mechanics. They don't just give you one go against it, against a particular boss, every few hours. You can't master the mechanics that way. Maybe once you unlock the Pinnacle boss fight, you also unlock some kind of a practice mode. You fight him in a mock battle, you don't get any reward for it, just to try out the mechanics before you go in and lose your 40 hours of farming. And then for maps, for instance, right? We have the 6 portals. Why not give us 6 attempts? Maybe give some kind of extra deathless reward, or maybe a nerf to our reward for every death, but not a complete and total failure and huge setback because of one misstep. But I don't know. What do you folks think? Should things remain as punishing as they are? Sound off in the comments. Ultimately, I am fine with things staying as they are, but I also wouldn't mind things being less punishing. I think it would also be great to have some kind of death recap, like just something that tells you at least what damage type killed you. It can be pretty difficult, I feel, to discern, first off, what particular attack killed you, and then what damage, what element or whatever what's a damage type that got you. Was it physical? Do you need more armor? Was it, fire? Do you need more fire resist? This way you can actually learn from the death and know what you need to do to fix your build or what you can work on in order to better survive. Another thing I noticed from mapping is that map layouts are, as expected, pretty big, and they can also result in quite a bit of backtracking when you're trying to find that last enemy that you need to kill. I'm glad that they at least show it on the minimap, but yeah, it could result in quite a bit of backtracking, and we gave Diablo 4 a lot of crap for all the backtracking we had to do before they fixed that by creating maps with more circular designs and also letting the final monsters teleport to you at the end instead of you having to go track them down. I don't think this is what we want in PoE 2. I don't think we want the monsters to suddenly teleport to us. I'm not sure getting ambushed in a game in which death is so punishing and so easy to die is what we want, but maybe they can add checkpoints into maps for fast travel. All right, now I want to take a moment to talk about loot and crafting. So I'm playing solo self-found for now because I want to first see what the solo self-found experience is before I get into trading. And I think I've changed maybe 2 pieces of gear in the last 10 levels of play. Gear progression hit a hard standstill for me after the campaign ended. Basically, as I was getting close to the campaign and I really worked on crafting my gear and getting all my resists up and getting my gear in a good place, and then I got to mapping, and again, I've leveled up 10 times. I've maybe changed 2 pieces of gear. And this is not about loot scarcity. I'm not saying I want more loot to drop. Maybe more currency, because I still find myself hoarding my exalts and my alchemist orbs, saving them only for like my best items rather than using them more liberally to try to craft upgrades. But the result is basically that I don't think I've been excited for a drop since early game. Like, I got a few really lucky uniques early on, which were amazing. And it just feels like since then, drops aren't exciting me anymore. And I think part of the reason for that is by the end of the campaign, as I said, I completed my gear puzzle. I got my resists where I wanted them to be. I got my strength, my dex, and my intel where I want them. And now, anytime I find a potential upgrade, I have to basically reconfigure my entire puzzle. Oh, I just found this belt. It's got a ton of life. Wow, that's really cool. But if I take this belt, then I lose a ton of cold resist. Okay, so then I gotta swap out my ring. This ring is all resist. I can take my ring that gives like a ton of cold resist instead. Okay, that's how I fix that. Oh, but then I had dex on that ring, and if I lose the dex, well, now I can't equip my 4th dex support gem. Okay, so I can respec some of my passive nodes. Oh, but then I won't have the strength needed to hold my weapon. Or if I respec intelligence instead, I won't have the intelligence needed for my highest level skills. And I can't de-level my skills, so I can't lose that intel. And it all just comes together to feel like it's basically a house of cards where I have to be super careful or it all just comes crumbling down and my build breaks. Now, don't get me wrong, I like having these puzzles to solve. I like the resist puzzle, and I love that we can swap the attributes in the passive tree now. Excellent change. But I think maybe attribute requirements are a little overtuned right now. Like, as an intelligence-based class, why do I have to invest so heavily into getting more intelligence just to be able to use my skills? I feel like I'm just always struggling to maintain attribute requirements. Also, if we had the ability to overwrite runes in gear, that would also help tremendously to give more flexibility in solving the resist puzzle. I'm not saying we get the existing runes back. Maybe we even lose the socket altogether, so we have to reinvest into putting a new socket onto the item and the new rune. But just as it stands, right? Like, I'm hesitating even to put a rune in once I have a good item, because I know once I've committed, that's it. Anyway, as it stands, it all just comes together in a way that I can't just find a nice drop, get excited about it, and put it on right away. I have to like change 3 different items to ensure my build doesn't break. It's not, oh, here's a great drop, let me equip it. It's, oh, here's a great drop. Let me see if I could possibly work this into my build right now. And again, allowing an uncut skill gem to create a gem of any lower level would help as well. It would also help when we realize that the climbing mana costs of an upgraded skill are unmanageable with our build, and we want to lower the skill level to lower the mana cost. Feels like we've replaced Flask Piano with Mana Flask spam. Again though, I'll stress, I'm loving Path of Exile 2. I'm still playing it. It's still the only game that I want to play right now. Just giving feedback because we're in early access and we want this game to be as good as it can be. So I encourage you folks, sign off in the comments. If you disagree with me, please let me know. If you agree with me, please let me know. Oh, and I hope they add a hideout that is like the Act 2 Caravan Town. That's the coolest town hub concept in any game I've ever played. And by the way, folks, definitely check out Neversink's PoE 2 Light Filter. While there's still weeks away from a full filter blade loot filter, the light filter he's made does not hide anything, but it better highlights different drops. Really a great tool. Then in Diablo-related news, some of the original Diablo 2 devs are working on a new game. And it's not the usual suspects. We got Phil Shank, as in Shank the Overseer, the man who wrote the Diablo World Bible, and Peter Hu, the main architect behind Diablo 2's massive patch 1.10, which added rune words and skill synergies. These guys came together because they wanted to make an aRPG again, and they also got Eric Schaefer on board, one of the original 3 founders of Condor, aka Blizzard North. They formed their studio, Moon Beast Productions, back in 2021, and they've secured $4.5 million in funding for their new aRPG project. And I think it's okay for me to say that I was in talks with them a year or 2 ago. They showed me some stuff, and I'm not going to give details. I'll let them do that when they're ready, but they have some inventive ideas that no one else is doing. Some ambitious stuff, and there's a side of the project that really excites me, which was user-generated content mods. They really want to support modding. They want to make it easy for players to integrate their own content. So they want to build in-game tools that allow players to create anything, including entirely new game modes, in the same way that people used to do that with, StarCraft and Warcraft back in the day. I've always loved the modding scene. It's like my favorite thing about being a PC gamer. I used to love playing in the map editor and old Blizzard games, and I was always sad, actually, that Diablo never got that treatment, that robust modding support. So an aRPG with modding tools built in, where we can make our own classes, our own skills, we can make our own balance changes. Of course, it would be vanilla servers, but the only way to truly make a game that can make everyone happy is to let people mod the game in a way that they want. If you're not happy with drop rates, you don't like respec costs, you're unhappy that your favorite build was nerfed, well, you can play on a modded server that has everything adjusted in a way that you like. And content? Devs can't generate content fast enough to keep up with our demands as players, but when users can also generate content, the possibilities are endless. The founders of Moonbeast have dreamed of aRPG gameplay in more open, dynamic worlds, and they're ready to take the genre in a fresh direction. And I look forward to seeing where they go. Meanwhile, in Diablo 2 Resurrected, we're currently going through the 22 Nights of Terror event, which returns from last year. This is actually a really neat event where, from December 13th to January 4th, there's some kind of different in-game effect every day. Examples include one day all vendors offer a 50% discount. Another day all heroes have double their hit points. Another day all your physical damage is increased by 50%. Another day you get bonus health regeneration. Another day you get a 100% speed boost. Another 100% damage bonus against undead. Great time for bindle runs. Another day you get a 75% boost to your resistances. I really like this. These are effects that can change your day-to-day experience. You may be more inclined to log in on certain days to benefit from specific effects, and those effects may change what gear you wear or what character you even play or what kind of activity you participate in. This also coincides nicely with the start of the latest season, which was on December 6th. So we're a couple weeks into the season, enough time that people had a regular season start, but not so deep in that people are done with the season. Meanwhile, in Diablo 4, the Sleigh Ride to Hell Goblin Event kicked off, and initial reports from some players at least was, where are the goblins? The devs then put out a hotfix that increased the number of goblin spawns, but I think overall there just was some confusion over where to find the goblins. Seems Nahantu Helltides and Nightmare Dungeon Greed Shrines are where goblins are the most plentiful. I've heard people find 30 goblins in 15 minutes. And I mean, some people must be finding them goblins because the community quickly reached tier 2 of the goblin slaying goal. That's 10 million goblins killed, which is 1/4 of the way to the final tier 5 goal of 40 million goblins. If things continue at this rate, we'll probably be done by next week. It is unfortunate that there's no in-game tracker for the goblin kills. Seeing the progress more clearly, I think, would really help tie things together and rally people better to the cause. Oh, and something that would have been cool to add to this, those Helltide worms that vomit up, enemy ambushes on you, have them vomit up a goblin pack instead. Also, in case you folks didn't know, if you own both Vessel of Hatred and World of Warcraft The War Within, then you can claim free in-game cosmetics in both games until January 7th. Then in some Elden Ring news, there's a network test coming up for Elden Ring Night Rain, the new co-op roguelike, souls-like amalgamation of From Software's greatest hits. The test is coming in February, and registration for the network test will begin on January 10th, but you can add your email to the mailing list on the official website now to be notified when signups begin. The network test is a preliminary verification test in which selected testers will play a portion of the game. And given how From Software is not exactly known for having the best multiplayer implementation and netcode, it's great that they're doing this test. Unfortunately, it seems to be only on console. The test does not seem to mention PC. This is a title that I'm really looking forward to, and it is not just some quick cash grab. After the success of Elden Ring's recent expansion, data miners had found traces of Night Rain at least 15 months ago, and the game director stated in a recent interview with Famitsu that they actually started development on Night Rain near the end of Elden Ring's development. Also, From Software revealed that Elden Ring has sold 28.6 million copies as of September. In June, they had reported 24 million, so that's a significant increase in a short amount of time. By comparison, the entire Dark Souls series sold 35 million copies throughout its lifetime. It's incredible how Elden Ring managed to unlock what was a relatively niche genre and open it up to the masses. It's the most accessible of all their games while still retaining the heart of what makes it a Souls-like. Then in some Borderlands 4 news, it seems that the narrative director, Sam Winkler, is not a fan of the franchise's poop and fart jokes. He took to Twitter to say, quote, "Not at liberty to talk much about the content of Borderlands 4, but I remain firm in my criticism of Borderlands 3 overabundance of toilet humor." And he later added, quote, "I am not going to say there's no toilets, but if the word skibbity ships in the game under my watch, I'm going to cry real tears." Paul Tassi joked that we were going to have a gun called Hawk 2A, and a fellow dev asked me if it was real, and I wanted to put my hand down the sink grinder. While the writing of Borderlands 3 was criticized, Borderlands 2 also had some humor that some may find cringy. And everyone loves that game. The lead writer of Borderlands 2 was Anthony Birch, who did not return for Borderlands 3, so it seems the Borderlands 3 writers were just trying to emulate his style, but maybe push things too far. But what do you folks think? Are you happy to be done with the toilet humor, or was that a core part of Borderlands for you? Lastly, in some quick Grim Dawn news, the devs recently released a patch that includes a ton of changes, including a bunch of buffs. The max run speed buffs in particular look interesting. This is an aRPG without a seasonal model, a game that has no ongoing monetization, a game that hasn't even received a monetized expansion since 2019. And yet the devs continue to put out free patches. In summer 2023, the devs did announce a third expansion, surprising us all, Fangs of Asterkarn, which will release in 2025, probably. And it'll add a new shape-shifting mastery. I've got an old video talking about Grim Dawn, do check that out. Grim Dawn is one of the best aRPGs of the last generation. And that's going to wrap up this week's video, folks, but do be sure to check out last week's video in which we discussed the launch of Path of Exile 2's Early Access. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more gaming content.